I tried the most overpowered build in Path of Exile according to some of the best, most well-known and respected players in the community. What kind of build? How does it work? Should you try it? Yeah, you should try it. So I'm a Path of Exile noob and I decided to challenge myself to beat every single map in the game, and also the Maven, the final boss of PoE that only 0.6% of players have beaten. But for that, I need a build. And not just any build. I need a build that is incredibly OP, cheap to make, beginner friendly, one that even a Balkan-brained goat lover like myself can easily tear through endgame content with, one that is agreed upon by many to be the strongest build in the game. If only such a build existed. Well, ladies, if there's no ladies here, and gentlemen, I present to you the level 99 hybrid mom Ice Nova Frostbolt's Hierophant, or as I like to call it, Ice Mommy. So what is this build more specifically? A mountain splitting warrior? An untouchable agile sharpshooter? A powerful mage commanding an army of the dead? Nope. Bubble blowing. It's bubble blowing. Bubble blowing that explodes into supernovas. But not hot supernovas like they normally are. These supernovas are made of ice. Bubble blowing ice novas. Bubble blowing ice novas that deal lightning damage. Bubble blowing ice novas that deal lightning damage while cosplaying as a chicken. This build does everything but fill the gaping void in your soul that you try to fill by playing this game for thousands and thousands of hours, only to discover that you're never satisfied, so you try to do more and more, but it's all in vain, filling you with a grim sense of existential dread. So yeah, here's the build. This build cost me little over 1 divine to get it going and mow through most of the content, and about 15 divines to face roll the rest of the content. And I bought all my gear, by the way. I didn't bother learning how to craft in this game. Fuck that. You can probably get away with spending way less than that if you just craft your own stuff. Here's how the build works. Early end game, the bubble blowing part is basically you casting multiple frostbolts and then using an alternate version of Ice Nova that lets you make the novas come out of the bubbles instead of your character. This gives your Ice Novas much better range in CC, and for reasons that I don't understand, the Ice Novas are for some reason going off way faster when you cast them on the bubbles than when you cast them normally, leading to way more damage per second. And when shit gets rough, you can just throw down your sigil for damage, your ice shield for protection, and just stand in your little circle blowing bubble vigorously and with passion. The build also comes with severe seizure-inducing properties, which is a good thing. One thing I've learned about Path of Exile is if you can't see what the fuck is happening on the screen, you're doing something right. Later on though, when you have gear good enough that you can sacrifice your helmet's stats for Kitava's Thirst, this is when the build really starts to shine. What Kitava's Thirst does, it's a helmet that has a 50% chance to auto-cast socketed spells when you spend 100 or more mana, which completely changes how the build plays. Basically, once you get Kitava's Thirst, you socket Frostbolt into it and just normally cast Ice Nova until the bubbles come out automatically, and then continue to shoot the novas through the bubbles like before. Now, in theory, this didn't seem like a major upgrade to me, but once I actually did it, it was quite a substantial damage boost because you get a much more consistent stream of Frostbolts than before, and you don't have to like cast Frostbolt yourself and then Ice Nova on it and then stop casting Ice Nova to get more Frostbolts going, rinse repeat. You just hold down right click and shit dies. Because of this, the gameplay of the build is also dramatically improved. Before you can get Kitava's Thirst, it's a little bit annoying to play, but after that it becomes a lot more smooth and a lot more fun to play. You basically teleport around with Frostblink until you see enemies, then bubble blow lightning Ice Novas at them. The gameplay flow becomes rather simple. We're gonna get to where the lightning damage comes from, the skill tree, the items, and the jewels in a second. I'm gonna start doing shoutouts at the end of future videos for channel members. We also got new channel emotes, generic badges, and the honorable title of Imperial Seaman, sailing the vast oceans of the internet, avoiding its many perils and thirst traps. Now available for members. Seriously though, if you like the content and you want to support the channel, consider becoming a member to get some cool perks, and it really does help the channel a ton. Now please keep in mind, this build was doing fine the way that I have it now, so I didn't bother taking it to its maximum potential with gear, flasks, jewels, etc. Although, being PoE players, I'm sure some of you have already noticed and pointed it out in a comment the size of a short novel. Please don't neglect the part where you tell me how many thousands of hours you've played and how you're still a beginner. That's the best part. And while you're at it, why don't you become a member so you can use some of those cool channel emotes in your comment? Oh yeah, you little fucking, I know you want to. If you were to take this build to its full potential, however, this is what it would look like. First off, your cast speed would be so crazy that you barely even need to hold down right click anymore. Just just hold it down for like half a second and then move into the direction of your bubbles for fast clearing. But also, because of that fast cast speed, mana starts to become a problem, so you're gonna need the mana recovery nodes from the skill tree, which I did not need because my cast speed was not that crazy. You can also pair Frostblink with Flame Dash for a double teleport, which I did not do. Since I didn't bother getting all the best gear or flasks or jewels or skill gems or levels for this build, I didn't have enough cast speed for mana to be a problem, but also my chance to suppress spell damage was a problem. This chance to suppress spell damage is important for this build, and those items are expensive. So I ended up sacrificing some of my mana recovery skills, not my maximum mana skills. You need as much maximum mana as possible. I'll get to that. And because of that, I was able to use those extra skill points to make up for my other missing stats a bit. Okay, now to get to the nitty-gritty of it. How do you actually make this build? The great thing about this build is its offense is also its defense, and vice versa. You can see we've taken a lot of maximum mana throughout the skill tree, like all over the place. Here's why. Mind over matter. 40% of damage taken is taken from mana before it's taken from life. So all the damage you take is reduced by 40%, and it's taken out of your mana instead. This is why it's so important for mana to not be important while you're casting. And now if we go over here to the Ascendancy, a big chunk of maximum mana, and another 10% damage conversion from life to mana. Then we gain mana as energy shield. Over here we get more spell damage based on our maximum mana, and our attacks have a lot more AoE based on the mana that we have. But this bad boy here, increases and reductions to maximum mana also apply to shock effect. And because we're doing lightning damage, the more mana we have, the better our shock is. The way that we end up with lightning damage on Ice Nova is through the support gems and the skills. So you can see how important it is to get as much mana as possible for this build, both for your damage and survivability. This build, even like this, kind of ended up being strong enough that I never really bothered with the flasks. Like you can see I still have a mana flask over here even though I never use it, which is probably stupid on my part, but most of the times that I was dying, and by most I mean like 80% of my deaths were due to being frozen, so I just took this, and this is like the only flask that I use. Another thing about this build is it scales incredibly well with gear. I did delves to farm currency on this guy, and every time I would get a gear upgrade, I was able to do substantially harder depth levels every time. If you want to farm to fund this build, I was making 2 to 3 divines every about 4 or so hours early endgame on this guy. Selling the resonators from delves is also pretty convenient this league, because you can just put them up on the currency exchange and you don't have to commit the gamer sin of interacting with humans. Thou shalt not come out of your man cave, physically or online. Speaking of the resonators, I know that they're used for crafting something, but I have no idea what. I know it's something to do with the fossils and the sockets, but I spent this entire playthrough selling things that I have no idea what they're used for. I built a defibrillator in King's March and didn't use it once. Fuck that. Crafting bench is good enough for me. If you're like me and you didn't bother learning how to craft in this game, or you just decide to buy it because you have a lot of money, or for whatever reason you do decide to buy it, it's pretty easy to find people that are selling the proper gear for this build. I don't know why I'm getting the impression that this build is kind of popular. Even though I was lazy with this build, it still did pretty well and got me through yellow tier 16s with little to no problems. So, how did my self-imposed suffering go? Well, even without going anywhere near maxing this guy out, I still did good against Maven. Fucked up the mechanic with the gravity wells though, and as a result was left with very little boss room by the end of it. Also walked into the beams that stop you from regenerating during the memory game twice, and lost all my portals. Even at this level of power, this build can still beat Maven. The only reason I failed was because I messed up the mechanics. My friends, I am sad to admit that it was indeed a skill issue. I figured at least I could do the other half of my goal and finish all of the tier maps. Before I did Maven, I had already done everything up until all the tier 16s. I didn't have any tier 17 maps, and then I saw that they cost 1 divine per map. Fuck that. I'm gonna attempt Maven again about a week after this video comes out live on YouTube, so subscribe and do the bell thing so you don't miss that. I'll also eventually get back to streaming on my Firebomb character from the previous video and try to fix that god-awful build with your guys' help. And then we can finish our goal and do the tier 17s with him. Don't forget to become a member to get a shout-out, emotes, badges, and the glorious title of Imperial Seaman.